Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Justin the Food Entrepreneur Show. I'm Justin Bizzarro. I'm your host. That's Bizzarro. You can find us on Instagram at Justin the Food Entrepreneurs or at Justin Bizzarro. And if you want to share the show or tell other people about it, comment, like, follow, we're on multiple platforms, including Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube podcasts. We just got uploaded on there finally, so on there as well. With that being said, I have Joey Pepperback from Harvest Bible Chapel in Chicago, Illinois. How are you doing today, Joey?
I'm doing well. I'm excited for part two. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, you're welcome. Let's dive into the questions and sort of some of the things that I think on a higher level, spiritual level, universal law level, that I wanted to get into with this and sort of being able to reach out to those out there, not only Christians, but those who are wanting to do good in the world and start taking steps to have their businesses do better or them do better in their world, their family, their business, whatever. There's a lot of core values and stuff as Christians that we often hear about, but we don't know how to properly practice as entrepreneurs in our businesses or as businessmen when we're out in the workforce or even in the secular world. So let's talk about a little bit of translating the pursuit of God in the way we're to do it as Christians and spreading the word of the gospel. And in your mind, how do we go out and do that as Christians in a proper way that doesn't taint or misrepresent anything? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would encourage people who are listening to this, if they didn't listen to the first one, go back and listen to that. It has a lot more of the background of where this question's coming from. But I think initially, that there's so many routes I could take with this. But one of the things I think is a positive about human beings and a negative about human beings is that we are all looking for like the formula. Give me the A and the B to get to C. Like, how do I, it's the same with like fitness, right? How do I lose 10 pounds of fat? Give me exactly what I need to do. Make it the same for everybody. That's why McDonald's does so well, right? That's why In-N-Out does so well. They have their thing. They are consistent. They have the formula. That's what people want. They know what to expect. That is really not the case when it comes to Christianity. And then it's certainly not the case when it comes to individuals like applying principles of the Bible to their own life. There is no formula. I think what I initially come to is Hebrews chapter 12, which says that we fix our eyes on Jesus. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and he sat down at the right hand of God. And it says, because of that, let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. When I hear that, I think, Justin, I don't know if you were a sports guy growing up, but I think about like cross-country runners. Yeah, I think about cross-country runners and the race marked out for us. Right? They had a clear path. Everybody ran the same race. If you're in track, you have a quarter mile. You know exactly what you're supposed to do, and everybody's running it. So that's what comes to my mind is like, well, as Christians, like we should have the same race. But if you look at the life of any Christian, some people, they have no financial issues. Some people, that's all they have is financial issues. Some people have marital issues. Some people have a great family. So the principle there is that our race is not the same. And so initially, like the way in which we implement the principles of the Bible to our own life is not going to be the same. So first and foremost, what does it look like? It doesn't look like a formula. If that makes any sense, and we'd love your feedback there before we get into specifics.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's not a formula. And actually, when you start talking about sports, I thought you were going to extend into Hebrews 12:6, which is, my son, do not make light of the Lord's discipline, and do not lose heart when he rebukes you, because the Lord disciplines the one he loves, and he chastens everyone he accepts as his son. And I thought you were going to partially go there because I agree with you on the first part, but also in the sports reflection, I think those who have talent go through the greatest hardship of growth and criticism in that growth, and it's no different than Christianity. I thought, because there's that as well, but we can touch upon that, where sort of the suffering that sort of happens along the journey is a growing pain necessary to live up to our potential that God wants us to, if you want to look at it that way. But number two, get to a place where we can truly feel God's love and also be a vehicle that spreads God's love. So I was thinking that, because that does take discipline, that does take feedback, that does take making mistakes and criticism, particularly the two verses we just talked about. But yes, I do think because we're all created, I'm going to say this, because we're all created equally. We're all a spirit that gets into a being. What happens from our birth or during our creation, how our mother eats, how the environment around her stress, I get all those things matter from the creation point. Whether or not we're the same or not, or our circumstances are the same, is relative only to the reality that we live in God's world. I think what we're also saying is that we're all equal and we all have the opportunity to pursue him, but the plan, like Joey said, it's got to be customized to us, and the person that helps us customize is only the relationship with God. I mean, he's the mentor who designs the plan. Ultimately, we just have to follow it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know when this episode's going to get released, but it's New Year's. And I think the question that is on the forefront of everybody's mind is, well, what next? What's next for me? Like, what do I have in store? What do I want to do in 2025? And I think that's the question here. The original question is like, well, how do I implement faith into my life and into my business? And that's a very similar question. Like, what do I have to do? What do I have to do? Like, what are the steps to get me there? And I think that's the wrong question. And maybe you're not asking that question, but if you are, I would suggest a restructure of your question, not from what do I have to do, but who am I going to be in 2025? Like, that's the whole purpose of the Christian life. The Christian life is not, well, what am I going to do? As if we have much value to add to our salvation. But it is like, who am I going to become? And where do I get that? I get that from 1 Thessalonians chapter 4. So it's fucking outright. What is the will of God in my life? It says the will of God is that you be sanctified. And so how do I implement faith into my life and business? You become a person of faith. And as you become a person that looks like Christ, it should automatically just transfer over. You're the same person. There's an image that I like to use. We think of our life as like a pie, like 30% of my pie slice can go to business or to work or to whatever. And then 30% can go to family, 20% to hobbies, and 10% to education, 10% to sleep, whatever you want. But that's not true. Like, your life is not a pie of separated things. Like, you are a smoothie blended into one thing, and that makes up who you are. And so, like, your life and your business are functionally, they might be different, but with the integrity in which you do both, it flows from who you are. It doesn't flow from what you do. If that makes any sense. Like, how do you implement faith? Well, you just become more faithful.
Yeah, and I think this is a good time to talk about it. It is New Year's. It is that time of year. It is everyone's like starting their new diets, their new plans, whatever, mostly focused on outside things. I think we set goals. I want a new house. I want whatever. All good things. Goals are important. But I think the part that is always missing is, one, from a true theological standpoint, time is not the way that we think about it from the standpoint of our actions have very long-term impact and influence, potentially good or bad, beyond any way we can ever imagine, because we don't operate as humans on that level, and it's very hard for us to think of things in years, let alone hundreds of years. And if anything, what seminary has done is you look back so far, but you also understand the history of the world and humanity before Jesus Christ and after Jesus Christ in the world that we live in now versus then. Is it perfect? No, that's not quite the way it works. It has to be a choice for us to choose God. It has to be a choice for us to choose Jesus Christ. That's part of the deal. That's why baptism is important. The public, announcement of our faith, at least the beginning of our faith, I should say, our faith journey. And so I agree with you. I think the other thing is there's parts and there's points in the Bible that specifically point out the higher standard of living that you were talking about, which leads to the attraction over promotion. If I'm doing what I'm supposed to do and I'm living a good life and I have peace, no matter how rebellious the world is around me, the consistency, the discipline, the ability to react peacefully and in an attempt to always grow the world around us is more attractive than living in a life of chaos and suffering. Do we suffer? Yes, it's just different. Is our suffering very emotionally painful? Yes, of course. Ours is just we choose to go through it consistently throughout life for the sake of growth toward being more like Jesus, growing towards God, emulating those things. So the difference is a lot of people may have emotional and physical pain. It's just theirs is concentrated because they don't deal with it, and then they're forced to have it happen to them versus for them. And in some case, God uses that to move us closer to him. But from a business entrepreneur standpoint, I think the more we can live by it, to your point, the more it echoes, because our employees are a reflection of leadership. So,
Yeah, I mean, I agree. And I think this is like an important question, right? Especially for business leaders. Like, who are you going to be? I mean, there's temptations of, any business owner out there to, cut corners or what have you. But no, I agree. Very important question.
well, and I think part of for any entrepreneur is getting these disciplines and this obedience down early on in your life as you become entrepreneurs. It is vitally important, especially if money does become something that becomes voluminous in your life, or things you become popular and people feed your ego because of what you've done, not who you are. That does happen, I will tell you. And a lot of people gassing you up to get what they want, to use you as a quote unquote jump starter to their career because you've already made it. So they think if they have money, they'll make it too. But the reality is, without the humility of the beginning, without the humility along the way, God willing, then we're not prepared to handle the things that matter, these decisions that lead us down bad roads. Like P. Diddy's a great example. The dude had all the money, all the power, everything in the world, so much influence and impact. And what did he choose to do with it? And why? And where did it go wrong? And what values? We're so caught up in what he did, we're not focused on why and how we can make sure it doesn't happen again, or at least happen to our family or our business or our business partners. And the only way I know how to fight that battle on a spiritual level is living the lifestyle. Are there wars and stuff that need to be fought over Christianity in this world? Sure. But on a greater level, it's on a spiritual level, which is doing the right thing peacefully as possible. I mean, so I don't know. I got in the weeds there.
I think we touched on that a lot in the first episode.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I would just encourage listeners to go back.
Let's talk about seeking, like, how do you, what do you I mean, the Bible is something we filter ourselves with. It's such a confusing thing to me always, because here's this thing: I want to do better in the outside world, but it means I got to concentrate more on one book versus multiple books. Of course, reading multiple books is a good thing, but at the end of the day, the consistency, going back to this one, for whatever reason, the mentorship in there, which we talked about in the first episode, is so important. So I'm going to ask another question. Okay. A lot of entrepreneurs are heads of their family, whether they're male or female. That is the world we live in, even though whatever. Okay. So let's just talk about how, as a head of the family, and I'm talking not only our immediate family, but our extended family as well, right? We have a lot of influence over them. So as a Christian, as someone who, as a pastor, you're equipping us, you're helping us with the armor of God, put that on, and helping equip us to go spread the word, but also live the lifestyle. So if you have someone come in that's like, oh my gosh, I'm the leader of my family, how do I lead in this way? Is there a certain way you would do it? Is there a certain way that you recommended? Obviously, we talked about it varies by circumstance, but let's just talk generally.
Yes. I love this question. Could talk about it for a long time. Yeah, I think that Ephesians 5 is just a chapter that needs to be talked about around this question. Ephesians 5 talks about our relationship to the church, and it's a model, right? But he also describes the role of wives and the roles of husbands and the roles of children. And I don't know if you have any children listening to this, but if you are children, first step, listen to your father and mother. And then fathers, it says respect your children. It does say to discipline them, but above all, respect them. They need to grow up knowing that, like, one, their parents don't know everything, but two, that it's not that they know nothing. Like, they have their own say, they have their own life, and they need to be able to make their own mistakes. That is respecting them, is giving them the freedom to mess up. You have the freedom to mess up. That is why you learn lessons as adults, like as business people. You are expecting to fail, and yet so often kids growing up have all of the pressure to succeed because, God forbid, they fail once. But that's just not how the world works. The world is a world of failure, and that's what we learn from. And so why do we not offer that same flexibility and freedom to our kids? That would just be my first word of advice for parents. It's like, yes, your kids are going to fail. Yes, of course, 100%, all the time. And that's okay. And when they have a safe place to do that, like a safe home to fail, that's what's best. Now, if you just let them go in the wild to fail, of course, yeah, you're not going to raise a healthy child. A healthy child has a stable support system to bounce off of. So as a parent, as a Christian parent, as a non-Christian parent, whatever has you, are you going to be the ceiling for your kid, or are you going to be the floor? Are you going to raise them up to the place where they have a launch pad, or are you going to stop them and quash their growth, quash their learning, quash their ability to, like, find out who they are, find out what they're gifted in, find out what they're not? That's up to you as a parent. Like, what are you going to do with that? And how you handle that failure, that's another conversation for sure. But implementing faith into family is difficult because some families are not close, some families are. So you have to find the right balance, right? But ultimately, what is at the core of all of that is a family that will trust one another, and a family that will lean on and rely on God. And this is, you said entrepreneurs are usually the heads of the household. This is specific to the Christian faith. It's not specific to the world we live in right now. The Bible is very clear that marriage is a picture of Jesus and the church, right? Jesus is the head of the church, and therefore husbands are the head of the family. That is not a sexist form from the Bible. It is simply saying, like, hey, there are roles here. There are pictures and images of how Christ loves the church and how husbands should love a wife. And then from that love, the wife should respond in submission, just as we submit to Christ because he died for us. We must die to our wives. And really, when you look at that, it is a almost to the world, that would be like a reversal of situations. As the husband dies, the wife is elevated. Um, and so that is in no way like a statue for using that power or abusing it. It is a statue to say, no, I'm above all, first and foremost, going to serve and love my wife. Uh, and husbands, if you are not doing that, you are not implementing faith into your marriage, regardless of how many times you begrudgingly go to church with your wife. If you are not leading the charge to do so in a joyful manner outside of Sunday morning, that you are not being faithful to what God has called you. If you call yourself a Christian, so how do you implement faith well into a family? Well, one, you have to understand what Jesus let children come to him. And just as they are, just as he lets us come to him, so we must let our children do the same. And then two, it is the role of the husband in a Christ-like family to be the spiritual leader. And I think that is where most families are crumbling right now, is that the men of this age they are not equipped. They don't maybe even know, maybe they're ignorant to the fact that that is their role, but they are absent, and it is an epidemic. I think that is a greater problem to us than what COVID caused America, is the fact that we do not have men of God raising up as leaders and bringing up children in the same way. So that's a long-winded answer to your question, Justin. But yes, that is what I would say to a healthy family.
Yeah, because epidemics are mental things. I know we can argue that it was a physical thing that moved between people, but epidemics are also non-physical, non-things that aren't based on biological things. They're things we create as humans, and we create epidemics as humans through our mental, the way we handle things or our actions. And I agree, we're in an epidemic where the moral and ethical foundations are lessening, and that's because there's this image that it's cool to rebel against the standard, but the reality is the majority of people rebel. It's not the cool thing to do. People have been rebelling forever. Like, it's just not the cool thing, even though we think it's the cool thing. A majority of people do the cool thing, quote unquote, which is rebel. So how is that the cool thing when a majority of the people are doing it, unless we want to be like everyone else, which I don't think that's the goal in the individual society we're in. But it's a contradiction there. So if we want to rebel, it's finding our individuality and our own growth and taking responsibility for our own self. Meaning our jar's got to be empty enough to fill with the Holy Spirit. And thus we've got to be focused on this, which is also Ephesians 5. It's, be filled with the Spirit, speaking to one another with psalms, hymns, and songs from the Spirit. Sing and make music from your heart to the Lord, always giving thanks to God the Father for everything in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. So it's that part of that is people are like, oh, I'm not going to sing to my kids. I get what you're saying, but part of it is that I'm doing it in a way, I'm passing on an energy to my children or to my family or to my businesses or to my employees that's from the heart, that's kind. That even when I'm delivering hard information or someone's done something against me, that I'm doing it in a way that's filled with love and that you could play music to. And I think the second part is no matter how bad our lives are, how bad we think things are, it can always be worse. So give thanks now. Give thanks for your family, even though you may be going through hardships or whatever. I read a statistic the other day that's crazy. Every family in the world, either through 1 or 2 degrees of separation, is either going through life-threatening sickness or a death right now in some way or form. And that's crazy to think about, over how many degrees of separation. So it's just the human condition. Suffering is part of it, but loving each other, being grateful for what we have in the moment when times are good and times are bad for the lessons we're learning, I think is important as well, while we're on that same topic. You ready for another question, Joey?
Yeah, absolutely. I see it.
All right, let's talk about the practice of business in general. I think a lot of people think making money is bad in business. I think that a lot of people feel that because it says money leads to all evil, that making money and profiting is a bad thing. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I think if you're an entrepreneur, you probably wouldn't think that.
Yeah.
Maybe if you're looking at entrepreneurs, you might think that.
Yeah. Let's just
Um,
talk about it from a standpoint spiritually a little bit, because I get a lot of
yeah.
questions around that now that I'm in seminary and I'm also an entrepreneur, and the contradiction people feel there. I don't feel it's a contradiction, but let's talk about it.
Well, you said that money leads to it's the root of all evil.
Yeah.
The Bible actually it adds words to that. It says the love of money is the root of all evil.
Yeah.
And I think, well, one, that's a very fine line, right?
Yeah.
Between my own business, and I think the word of money is relative right now in this conversation because now in the age of social media, so doesn't have back then, the love of likes, the love of this video going viral, the love of attention, the love of fame, the love of celebrity, the love of whatever have you, leads to all evil lives because I will feel entitled to have all the power, control, and say of my own life, right? What is money? That life is so important. It's such an important concept. Does money buy happiness? That's another question. In one sense, no, but in one sense, yes, it does. Money does so much for us. It is no secret that those with money have more privilege than those that don't. But what the Bible is talking about when we talk about this principle is not the currency of money. It's saying the love of having control of your own life will lead to the root of all evil. Because money is a picture, it's a word picture for me. Look at me, I can do this on my own. The Christian life is not that. The Christian life is actually, I can do anything on my own. Jesus had to do it for me. Romans 7 and 8 talks a lot about this. It's like, I want to follow God's law in my mind, but my body won't let me. I want to be perfect and be holy and do all the right things, but I am not, and therefore I have been separated from God. But through Jesus, praise be to God that He fulfilled the law in me. And so now I stand righteous before a holy God. That is why I now am free from the love of quote unquote money, the love of this self-control that I so desire. And that's why people go into business in the first place, right? They want the control. Whatever profit is on them, whatever loss is on them, they are not tied to a boss anymore. Their schedule is controlled by who? Them. And it is not money directly. It is what money can give you, which is the feeling that I can do it myself. Why that's so detrimental to our faith is because then we become the one on the throne of our life, and we didn't give Christ his adequate amount of worship in which He does, one, yes, demand because He's God and He can, but two, He is worthy of it anyways. So that's what I would say from a general standpoint. Like, yes, as a business owner, you make money. Like, keep your doors open. The church is run a very similar way to a business, right? Like we're not profit, we give away our profit, quote unquote, like our margins or whatever, we donate it. But at the end of the day, like as a church, we have a budget and we want it to be black at the end of the year. Like we're not trying to go negative. And why? Well, if we have money, we can serve more people. So is money bad? No. But you have to ask yourself, am I in business because I feel like I can control everything myself? And is that the end goal? If that's the end goal, there's some caution there if you're a Christian. Or is the end goal to use business as a means to serve the kingdom and have an impact to the Lord in which He's calling you to do? There's this, that's like I said, at the beginning of this rant, that is a very fine line. But it is a line, and it is something that you have to consider.
Yeah, I agree. There's, and applying it to every situation is not the same. We all live in different circumstances, have different businesses, deal with moral and ethical dilemmas in different ways. And one of the things I will say, and part of the reason I want to do this is because success can lead to a lot of temptation. And that's because we start to think we are more, we're doing it versus God's doing it. And we start thinking it's us and our ego and us, and not giving true appreciation and gratitude, at least to the humans around us, let alone God. Things don't go very well. And I mean, that's a very, and by things not going very well, I mean, you may think you're getting by or you're getting by. That's not, there's more than that to life in the pursuit of God and pursuit of a relationship with Jesus. So, I think that that's something that, just to touch on while we're talking about it, let's go to your favorite part of the Bible, the thing that has taught you the most during your journey. What does that look like? Like, tell me something, a passage, an area that really keeps you grounded in the real world, and why?
Yeah, that's a great question. I have 2 tattoos on my body, and both of them are centered around passages that mean a lot to me. And so the first one, I did not grow up in church, as I'm sure a lot of your listeners can relate to, and I'm the youngest sibling of 6, and so um, I know what it means to be the brunt end of a joke, or take all sibling rivalries and sibling whatever have you that's constituted as bonding. But my oldest brother passed away about 10 years ago, and that was the day that I encountered the Lord for the first time. And so I have a verse on my, it was from Psalm 34, 17 and 18, and it talks about how the Lord is near to the brokenhearted. And how does that keep me tied to the real world? Well, if you just take a second and look around, everyone has had a broken heart in some form of fashion. Everybody has seen some sort of, let's say, trauma or issue or hardship or trial or whatever word you want to put into it. Life sucks sometimes. It's not all rainbows and butterflies. One of the most encouraging things in the Bible is every single story that is written within 66 different books of the Bible, 40 different authors, a 1,500-year time span between the first and the last book. Every single one of them are interwoven to tell the same story, and that is the story that God is near to the brokenhearted. And I just find that very fascinating, that both the Bible and the people outside of the Bible have experienced great heartache, but God is good in the midst of that. And that is very deeply encouraging to me on a general level. On a specific level of how do I integrate faith into my life, to kind of center back on the topic. My other tattoo is it's a Greek word, and it's the word doulos, which means it literally slave. That is the word that I have tattooed on my arm, which you might be like, well, it's 2025, that's a weird word tattooed on your arm. But the word has a deeper meaning in the ancient languages, and it means bond slave. And there was a ritual in the Old Testament, but it comes specifically from Mark 10:45, which says Jesus came not to be served, but to serve. So it means he became a bond slave. And the word bond slave is somebody who was freed from something, but willingly subjects himself back under his master's authority based on how well he was treated in the past. And so in Israel, you had bond slaves. They would put themselves under slavery for 7 years. They would pay back their debt that they owed. And then at the end of the 7 years, they would realize that the person that they were serving for the last 7 years had treated them so well, they would continue serving them. They were free from their debt, but they wanted to go back to their master. And so that was the term bond slave. And then Paul, he wrote half the New Testament. He calls us bond slaves for Jesus. And so the principle there of that word is that we have been freed from a great debt through Jesus. And because we've been treated so well by him, I, as a bond slave now, will willingly serve him as my master and put him above my life. It is not under compulsion. It is not under anything besides the fact that he has treated me so well. I'm free to go wherever I want to. I'm free from sin. I'm free from I'm free from all the things that I need to be free from. but because of the love of God, I put myself back under the authority of Jesus. And that to me keeps me grounded, because if I'm not under the authority of Jesus, I know my life is going to go astray. So those are two things that mean a lot to me. But man, I would love to. I don't know if I know that about you. I would love to hear from you what your passages like those are.
Yeah, mine's. I mean, it varies from time to time, but mine is 1 Timothy 3, which is, here is a trustworthy saying: whoever aspires to be an overseer desires a noble task. Now the overseer is to be above reproach, faithful to his wife, temperate, self-controlled, respectable, hospitable, able to teach, not given to drunkenness, not violent, but gentle, not quarrelsome, not a lover of money. He must manage his own family well and see that his children obey him, and he must do so in a manner worthy of full respect. And that's like, so 1 Timothy 3-5. That's my core one, and just because, and it's more oriented towards overseers and deacons within the church. But I think if all of us aspire to that same level, to not only oversee Christians, but the entirety of our world from that perspective, it's a pretty powerful statement. So that's where it is for me, honestly. And that one, and I like the slave thing that you brought up, because in the ancient world, the reason it's, and when you study theology, you have such a clear understanding why we did AD and BC, because the way historically the world was handled, governmentally controlling people, slavery, is completely two different episodes that happen around this weird little impact influencer changing everything named Jesus Christ, or Jesus. And the thing about it is, anyone who owed anyone money is technically enslaved to someone, in a lot of the way the word was used back in the day. So it had a very broad meaning, the word, and a lot of it was based on context. And so it could mean the horrible treatment of a human. It could also mean someone that was indebted to someone and owed them money and had to pay off the debt. So, I mean, technically, we are enslaved to banks, probably every single one of us at this point, majority of us in the United States. So I just want to touch on that, because it's, when we think of theology and we think of what actually Christianity has done for the world, we really have to understand also what the ancient world was like, and what an eye for an eye was like, and how horrible the human condition was prior to planting this seed that would ultimately lead to the Dark Ages, but more importantly, the Renaissance, that would sort of allow Christianity to really bring light into the world. And so, it took along stages, 313 AD and Constantine, all the things we talk about or know in the modern Christian history. But it's important to also understand the impact it's had on the world, even if not directly in Christians and Christianity. So I think that from a Western world standpoint, Western civilization, it's important to understand historically the impact that things like this can have generationally, and the things that we can do in our businesses or in our lives that can potentially have impact generationally as well. I'm not saying that we're Jesus, but we get the example, I think.
Yeah,
I have one more. Go ahead.
Yeah, I want to clarify something that's very important to clarify if it's not already clear. Jesus does not condone slavery. the way in which America has twisted that in American history, not one person should be proud of ever.
Agreed.
But you have to keep in context, who the Bible was written to. And one of the biggest questions that I get when I tell non-Christians that I have a tattoo on my arm that says slave is, why didn't Jesus do anything about slavery when he was here on earth? He didn't say much about it. And for one, that is the way that the world does work, right? Proverbs, the borrower, slave to the lender. And in ancient Israel, and especially in Jesus' time, that is, Israel's whole entire history is based around slavery. They were enslaved by country after country after country. And two, when they were free, the laws that they had, there's 613 of them. You can read them scripture, all of them, there's so many that deal with this topic that is mostly based financially. People would go into debt, they would sell their land, they would go work for this person as a quote unquote slave, and then either they paid off their debt or 7 years go by. And after every 7 years, every single slave that was there was free and their debt was washed. And then they were no longer bound to that. And it was a cultural thing that was fully, it's like every person in debt chose to go that route. And so, like, why didn't he deal with it? Well, one, it's cultural. We don't live like that now, obviously, thank God. But that's just the way that it was. And so when we read scripture through Western eyes, it's like, what? This doesn't make any sense. And yeah, you're right. It doesn't make any sense because we're not living 1,500 years ago, or 3,500 years ago. And 3,500 years ago, and that's taking place. So yeah, of course, it's not going to make any sense to us. Like 10 years ago, the thought of AI didn't make any sense to us, but here we are. So things changed. And just wanted to clarify that, like, the way in which we think about the term slavery is never condoned in the Bible, ever. But it would firmly condemn from, for sure, when it comes to following God.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I agree. There's been lots of historical twists and justification over the last 2,000-ish years to justify slavery in that way, or inappropriate behaviors of any sort. People can you can find a reason to be right about anything, guys. It's just the way it is, but doesn't make you very intelligent. I'm going to ask one more question as we get off here. This is a quick one. Talk to me about how we as an everyday human can be in a practice of getting closer to God. Like, what is it that you use to maintain your relationship with God and also remain in constant contact with Him? Like, what are you, I don't want to say tricks because we just discovered it's different for every individual, but I think knowing someone of the spiritual level of you helps give people a starting point.
Yeah, good question. First of all, like, there's no tiers of Christianity. Like, there's no like more spiritual person than missionaries. Missionaries or pastors do not hear from God any different than people hear from God.
It is a valid point, particularly in the celebrity pastor world we live in right now. I agree with you. Thank you.
100%. So like, I just want to clarify that. Like, one, I would love to learn from everyone else too. Like, yeah, I'm a pastor. I'm a master of divinity. I'm getting my doctorate in spiritual pastoral counseling. Like, I've written a book. Yes, I have some experience. I've been doing this for 10 years. I don't know everything. I never claim to know everything. In fact, I'm learning more about God every single day. And so, like, while I have some qualifications to speak on this, I in no way intend to, again, this goes back to my first answer, I think, to this podcast. There is no formula. But there is a system that works every single time. And the system is very simple. I'm going to reframe the question. We said, can I grow closer to God? And how do I stay connected to Him? Well, there is two ways that it will work every single time. And the first way, you have to spend time with Him. How do I stay connected to God and get to know Him more? You just do. You just have to pray. You have to read your Bible. These are the two ways in which God says that we hear from Him. We have to know what He says about Himself. And when we know what He says about Himself, we will know what He said about us. And so the more that we learn about God, the greater our capacity to love Him because we know more of Him. It's the same way with every single human being. Justin, how did I come to love you as a dear friend? We went through some stuff together, man. There was 2,000 middle school students the first time we met, and that was very forming in the mission check. Like, how do you get to know God better? Well, you go through it. You go through some stuff from it, and you learn to trust Him through the hard parts of your life. And when you do that, like, is treating a relationship with God any different than treating a relationship with people is doing you a disservice. You think that there's a mystical way you're going to hear from God without spending any time with Him, you're just wrong, and they're not going to do it. But I say it's simple. It's not easy. if it were easy, more people would do it. And I say that you have to read the Bible and you have to pray because I just read a study yesterday, actually. The millennial and Gen Z believers, there's 9% of us that read our Bible daily. 9%. And that's just reads in general. But how often, Justin, do you and I open the Bible and we're like, all right, well, I'm going to start reading and then I'm going to take a decent Instagram reel and then I get pulled aside and we read it, but we're not focused on it. And that doesn't even account for that. So it's 9%, which is staggering. And then if you look at the next generation, Gen Alpha, it was 4% of our middle school, up to like lower high school aged kids are reading God's word. So until that changes, like our society is going to continue to not know who God is because the only way they can know who God is they understand what he said about himself.
Yeah, I think that that's 100%. And I mean, I'm the same way. I'm a little more disciplined and obedient now than I was before. I mean, for me, I define fellowship. I did Men on Mission at Mission Hills with a group of men. The group of men I went through on that, we met every week on Sundays for 2 hours to discuss a book called Man of God. And I'll put it in the episode notes. And I mean, great book. It's about Timothy and Titus and Paul's writings in those. So that obviously I liked it because it's also one of my favorite verses we discussed earlier. But that, and then I did Regeneration, which was a daily task for, 13 months from groundworks to 9 months of step work and then like 3 to 4 months of groundworks to get through the 12 weeks of groundworks it takes to prepare for the step work. And it's like a biblical thing because we're all broken in some way, for sure. It's healthy to admit that. It doesn't mean I'm speaking negatively of myself. It just means I need to go work on myself. And, it just means that I'm consciously working on myself and self-reflecting. But I did that with a group of men also. There were 18 of us in that program. 17 of us made it all the way through. And that was daily exercise and questions with God. It's part of the reason you don't see a lot of podcasts at that time. And it's also when I spent that silent time with God was the ending of those steps and then spending time by myself with God and as much as I could in silence. So I think there's things, what I'm doing now, and I just started this today, is I got and it's never, you can do it anytime you want, just start on the day that it tells you. But I have, a daily reflections, a daily sitting with God journal, a whole exercise thing that puts me, one day of the Bible and it's from beginning to end 365 days, but also ask questions and reflections. And I do my reflections and my journaling as Dear God letters. Like I'm writing him a letter because that's how I'm able to express myself most, is through writing and reflecting as I write. But that's, for me, my system's a little different. For me to spend time with him, I have to write, because when I write, it doesn't allow outside distractions. It only allows my mind and the connection with him. And two is I have to have something that helps discipline me. The Bible, being in the Bible every day or in the Word of God in some way, whether it's regeneration, I'm sort of moving around as the step is relevant, or now doing it step by step, I have to remain it. The other thing I do is I have a Bible in my car. I have a Bible in my office, like studio, and I have a Bible, wherever I go in my home. And the thing is it's because I get used to the weight, the turning the pages, having it available as a resource to go to first before I pick up my phone and type it into Google. And it's an interesting practice, because if you can do that, it's not that I still can't go get answers elsewhere, but if I have the Word of God first to possibly filter it through, and I'm not talking reading it, I'm talking about opening it up, starting to read a little bit, and then opening up those memories and that connection, and then being able to get pointed to something that I may have once read before or something that I think might help me, and being able to reflect back on it. Now, I've expedited that a little bit with seminary and all the time I've spent in those types of books as well. But I think that those are my little cheats, is the daily workbooks spending time in fellowship, and then, making sure that you get used to the weight of that Bible in your hand as a weapon for you in your life to get through your life, as a tool in your life to get through life. I think that that's very important. And I know it's a little bit like, well, I could just put it on my phone. Totally get it. It's a little different when it's physically in your hand and it has the energy in your hand. Just saying. So that's for me anyway.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you want to comment on any of that before we close off here today, Joey?
Yeah, I have one comment. Like, the Christian life is not meant to be lived alone. That's a Jesus statement. But I just think of how isolated we've become as a nation and a world, but specifically the United States. And it's like, we wonder why we're not growing at all. It's because if you look at any other time period in the human history, any other time period, like, none of it happened with us separated as we were today. Like, none of it. Any movement that has been positive ever has had momentum as community. And I just think that we're foolish to think that we can continue growing in the Lord and continue separating ourselves further from human beings. Like, if that has never worked in the history of humanity, why would it work now? Like, I don't understand why we think that. Never in any context ever has finding the easiest way to do something been the way that works when it comes to like growth. So why do we try to find the easiest route, like way to spiritual growth? Like, I can't tell you just how many times I sit across from somebody, and I did student ministry for 6 years. So like, I've sat across from hundreds, if not thousands of students that tell me, Joey, I want to grow my relationship with Jesus. I say, okay, well, what do you want? They're like, well, like an hour-long church service is just a lot for me to pay attention to. And, I need like the 30-second Instagram reel, and I need like the verse of the day to pop up on my phone. And like, I'll spend 15 seconds reflecting on that. It's like, no, when has this ever grown another human being ever? It's like finding the shortest, simplest, most distraction that I can. At a certain point, it's like, you have to learn that if Jesus Christ is going to change your life, you have to let him, and you have to give him the space to do that. I think that's the biggest misuse of our spiritual growth, is we simply just don't get on the supposed to.
Yeah, I mean, I think we are so fast to our phones in the morning or evenings or whenever that's part of it. Something that's just so difficult to deal with, because as entrepreneurs, we're so attached to them, or in general as humanity, we're so attached to them. I really have had to focus on not dealing with my phone until the afternoon every day, where my first work day, quote unquote, as I get up during the day and do the podcast and stuff, is solely focused around that. And I don't allow in any other information. I get up, I spend my time with God. I do my, prayers. I read my Bible. I do my stuff, wherever I need to do it to get myself space to do it. And then I sort of do my day, my first day of the day. And before I move on to my second day, which is then where I get the phones, the social media stuff I got to attend to, stuff like that. But if you don't protect your time with God, or your family for that matter, or your business, and you let too many things be distractions, we would call them false idols, it does destroy not only your business, but it will take down the whole thing. It takes down the family, the business, and your relationship with God all in one fell swoop, because that is what generally happens when we don't try to do it. We can control pieces, and we can have all the stress of controlling it and making sure it doesn't happen or whatever. And there's a lot of people and humans that are very good at that. It's just there's a more peaceful route that grows you into such a greater human being and makes the life we spend here so much more fulfilling by the time we get to the next one. So thanks, Joey. I appreciate you. Where can they find you on Instagram and social media and things like that?
Yeah, they can find me on Amazon if they want to look up the book for the young people starting out in life and leadership by Joseph Pepper. And you can find me on TikTok at Joey Pepper, Instagram Joey_Pepper12. But yeah, reach out with any biblical questions that you guys have. As a pastor, it makes my heart happy to have conversations like this. So yeah, man, it's been a joy chatting with you, Justin.
Yeah, I appreciate it. We're going to have to do more down the road, maybe do some more, a little more pre-prep next time. But I really appreciate your time and appreciate you coming on the show. And everyone in the audience, I love you guys. Thanks for tuning in, and we're out.